Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Just Make It Pretty podcast. Today, we are talking about a brand new topic that I've never had on the show before, and that is the operational side of scaling in home building. Now, I know a lot of builders right now are trying to scale. They're trying to go from 100 to 200 or 200 to 500 homes a year. And there are a lot of little road bumps and things that come up during that process of scaling. So, today's guest is going to talk through what things you need to have in place as you scale, how to make sure that your culture scales with you, and just some really tactical and interesting tips on what it actually looks like to scale healthy. So if that is interesting to you, please stick around and we'll get right into it. Welcome to the Just Make It Pretty podcast, the marketing and mindset show for home builders and beyond. I'm your host, Sarah Haynes, and around here we go beyond pretty pictures and we get honest about what's working, what's not, and what it really takes to build better brands, better experiences, and better teams. You'll find creative ideas, practical strategies, and conversations that actually matter. I'm so glad you're here. Now let's get started. I just cannot wait to have this conversation because not only do I think this is going to be so impactful for you guys as listeners, I think that I am going to learn so much as well. So I'm so excited to introduce you to my guest today. And I'm going to do that right away because we're going to jump right into all of the good details today. So today I have Misty Martin with me. She is the Executive Vice President of Corporate Services and Experience over at Esperanza Homes. And I am so glad that we got connected, Misty. Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Sarah.
So I want to give the listeners a little bit of background if they have not met you before. So tell me, how did you get into your current role? Tell me a little bit about what brought you to Esperanza Homes and just a history.
Sure. Yep. So I came into Esperanza Homes or home building in general, through a more non-traditional path. The first 10 years of my career was spent in education. So K-12 education. I worked for one of the largest charter management organizations in the country called Idea Public Schools that was founded here in the Rio Grande Valley. So I spent 10 years there working my way up through the organization and landed on the senior team, leading the administrative services function for the organization. And by the time I decided to hang up my hat at Idea, we had grown from around 12 schools to 79 schools. We were serving 5,000 students at the time that I joined. We were at 45,000 students, had about 800 staff members when I joined. And by the time I left, we had 6,000. And we were spread out across the country in multiple different states. So that's super important to this story because I've only really known and been conditioned to know one pace and one speed, which is fast-paced, high-growth environments. And I really attribute my learning and my knowledge and my skills there to the time that I had over at Idea. So what drew me to Rhodes and Esperanza, Rhodes is our parent company, Esperanza Homes, was really the opportunity to build something from the inside out. Nick Rhodes, who is our CEO, he really compelled me with his vision to build homes down here in the Rio Grande Valley, not only for the purpose of building homes, but also for building communities. And as somebody who's been in the organization for 6 years, when I was speaking with Nick and making the decision to transition over, it sounded like a really good idea. It was very inspirational, but I've lived every single day that dream alongside him and the senior leadership team. And it's something that I'm really proud of in terms of, it's one thing for someone just to say, this is what I want us to do and to try to recruit somebody over, but to get here and actually see it all happen and be part of building it and being true to actually what the vision is has been something that's super exciting and has been something I've never regretted making the decision to transition over. So here I oversee a pretty broad portfolio. I oversee marketing, talent and people operations, data and IT, legal and risk management, support services, community engagement, so all the back office work. But really what ties it all together, we are like a motley crew. We've got a bunch of different people that are focused in different areas, but it's really that experience, not just for the buyers, not just for our team members or the stakeholders, it's for everybody. The experience really is the product. And so that has been something that's just been really inspirational to me and just really exciting for me to help be part of.
You have quite the title and quite the role. You have a very big job. I don't know how you do it. That sounds like a lot of work.
And I'm like, I laugh and I think about it. I'm like, I still am trying to figure out what do I want to do when I grow up. I just dabble in a little bit of everything, but it's fun. Every day is fun.
Yeah, I don't know if that feeling ever wears off. If it does for me, I'll let you know. But I also am like, I don't know. I see people and I'm like, well, I want to be you when I grow up. Well, I love to ask this question to people that we're not born into the industry, I like to say, but coming from outside of home building, I think it does bring so many different insights that not everyone inside of our industry gets to see. So, what stood out to you the most or like surprised you when you entered this space?
Yes. So I've been really surprised by how collaborative the industry is. I am a very competitive person by nature, so I'm always wanting to win, and I always just assume that industries, like we're competing against each other. Even in education, it was like, okay, who can get the best scores, etc. And I felt the home building industry is a for-profit entity. We're all trying to fight for the sale. I just assumed that would be the nature of the industry, just very competitive, closed off. And that has been like one of the things that stood out to me the most in terms of the industry, just how collaborative it is and how everyone really helps each other out and helps to improve each other through sharing best practices and everything. But the angle that I had coming into this organization was helping scale the organization and help build the infrastructure that really ultimately was putting us on the growth path to where we wanted to go. And so from that angle, I think that one of the advantages I had was coming from a very fast-paced, high-growth environment to now wanting to do that in a different industry. It was I had a different lens of not being clouded by this is just how we do things here, right? So I feel like I had a clean slate, and I feel like the industry has really picked up on some of the things that are more mainstream, right? We hear a lot about construction and home building being behind the times, but I think over the last 3 or 4 years, that, in my opinion, has started to shift, which is how invested in technology the industry has been, and just wanting to really push the envelope on how we are serving our customers. And so those are the things that kind of stood out to me over the last 6 years of being in the seat, for sure.
I love that you have a really positive outlook on everything. And I agree. I think I found so many vendors and home builders that do share all of their knowledge and insights and data even. And it is really refreshing. And I think that it's one of the things that I'm really passionate about as well, just sharing knowledge freely. We don't have to be in that like
Yes,
I think competition can be good, but I think that also sharing what you know and helping others around you, we can all rise together, I think is also something that's really cool.
100%. And there's just a lot of fun people in this industry too. And I've
Mhm.
gotten kind of out there more in the events, and there's a lot of good people in this industry.
Yes. They're all on my podcast. So if you want to find them, come here.
I'm joining the club.
Yes, exactly. We're talking today about scaling and growth and a lot of what you've already done there at Esperanza. So you obviously have the insights to share and the knowledge. But I think it's something that a lot of builders, like you said, we're always trying to innovate and grow. And I think growth sounds really good and fun. And we're like, yeah, let's go from building 50 homes to 200. Yay. But there's a lot of internal systems and processes and things like that you really have to have in place in order to do that. And I've seen a lot of companies and builders do it where those things start to crumble as you grow. And then you're in this weird position of we have to clean up a bunch and it ends up holding them back.
Yeah.
So my question for you to start that whole topic off is when you look at companies that are trying to scale, what do you think that they are underestimating about what that's going to take?
Really, this might sound like a funny response, but it's something that's really basic, and it's communication. I think folks just really underestimate the complexity of communication, but also how important it is, just the simplicity of it too, right? So when you're 20 people, everybody's in the room, you're not far removed from those that are making the decisions. Whenever you're now 200, 500,000 employees, you've the information has to travel through the layers. And if you haven't built those structures to move that information accurately and consistently, things start to break down. And when things start to break down, that's when things obviously you start having problems, but then you're poking at the holes to try to solve the problems, plugging the holes. And I don't think that it's ever that people stop caring. I think it's just that people just don't know what they don't know. And so having when you're smaller, you've got more informal systems, more informal ways of getting things done. That doesn't work in larger organizations with the extra complexity of the staffing size, the processes that have to be operating to keep things moving. And so I think that is one thing that's often underestimated. But then once you get it right, it's okay. This is now the foundation for which we can now build and scale things, because that has to be first, is those communication layers. The other thing I would say is that I think there's this interesting part in an organization's existence where you can feel it. The founder or the CEO is the person that's the microphone, right? Like the one's always communicating. And then as the organization grows and evolves, they start playing a different role, right? And so really, I feel like the CEO or the founder's capacity can very quickly become the ceiling whenever you are smaller. And like when you're growing, that leadership infrastructure is super critical to being able to cascade the information and work in on the organization at the pace that you need to reach those growth targets that you have.
I love that you started with that this is not, those breakdowns are not intentional and people don't stop caring, because I think that's something that as an employee, that it can feel like that as you start growing. It's he used to be in every single meeting and now I never even see him, and the roles kind of change. And I also like to put out that disclaimer when we talk about these things, because we're not saying, oh, hey, you suck and this is you did everything wrong. This is something that kind of naturally happens to companies, and it's just something that you need to build a process or the infrastructure around, and it's not necessarily a bad thing that it's only you going through type of thing.
No, for sure. And it's not that that communication ever stops. It just takes a new
Mhm.
shape, right? And being intentional about what that looks like, and I think is super, super incredible and important.
I agree. And communication is just the key to everything. Do you feel like there's other red flags that you end up seeing where maybe a company has scaled in not the best way, or maybe they didn't set down that foundation before they started to scale? What are the symptoms?
Yes, I think symptoms of that are when the same problems keep reoccurring, right? Or you start often in a growing organization, people start operating in silos. So fast-paced growth, high growth, it requires specialization. And so everybody's focused real intentionally on their lane and what they're doing, and they're specialized in it. They know what they're doing. And it's just like you've got these independent groups of teams that are working on their goal, but you've got to rise above that. And as the leadership group, make sure that there is the systems and the communication methodologies to keep everybody on the same page, regardless of what team you're on. And from the people and talent side, we're real big on centralized management of that. That was something that when I joined, we put a stake in the ground and said, we're going to manage talent centrally because we want everyone's we want to make sure the people that we're hiring here are going to be good, strong culture fits, that they've got the right skill set. And in order to scale, you've got to be able to hire quick. And if you're expecting the director of construction to be able to hire 40 people in a year, he's got a job to do, right? So you've got to have a team around him that can support him in that. But I think that since the symptoms are like, frustration mounts, continuous problems keep reoccurring, and there's no system to prevent the recurrence, right? So it's not that people are just doing this to create issues. It's just there's no system to prevent it. So I think that when all the critical information is in one person's head or a group of people's head, or there's no onboarding structure, or it takes forever to get something done because there's something documented or people are doing things different way, that consistency and experience gets broken, not only for the customer or for the stakeholder, but also for the people that are living within the organization as part of the culture. And that honestly, I think creates a lot of frustration and can be a big issue when trying to scale because the experience is completely thrown off by that.
I think too, like that internal experience, everybody in your organization is going to be experiencing everything through their own lens, obviously, and they're going to make up their own little narratives for why things are happening the way that they are. And through their past experiences, they come up with their judgment of it. And I think that what you started with the communication piece is really key to that, because I think a lot of businesses, as they grow, that kind of, it's like they don't share that part of it. They don't share as, okay, my role's changing, or here's what we've been working on. It's like if that information doesn't get down to each person, like you're leaving them to be able to create their own story. And it is definitely not an easy thing to do, but I think it's really important. And you create that understanding with your team of the bigger picture of what's happening around them.
100%.
Now, you also said something really interesting about hiring, and I'm jumping around in our schedule that we have set out, but I wanted to talk about, how do you make those decisions for hiring? How do you make it fast, but also make sure that you are bringing in people that are a good culture fit? I think that's so important for any company. and it's difficult to actually do. So what's your take on that?
Yes. So you have to have a solid people infrastructure. That's one thing that is, I think, so core to this, because every person that's in your organization, every hire that you make, it's a culture vote, right? Like, people can be really talented, have great skills, but if they're not a fit for the culture, things are going to erode one way or another. Either them personally, they're not going to be ultimately fulfilled long term. They might be getting the work done, but if they're causing issues just with trust or building relationships with other team members, it's not going to be a fit. So for us, we have a very standardized hiring practice. We have a director of talent and people operations who manages our entire recruitment process. And then our hiring managers are trained. We have all of our people managers. If you manage anybody in the organization, we've got what we refer to as the Rhodes Management and Leadership Academy. And everybody goes through, and all year long, we're doing leadership training and leadership development. So that's also really core, is that the leaders of the organization have got to have the skills to lead high performing, high trust teams. And so we've got a lot of emphasis on that through our development program, our leadership development program. So on the hiring side, though, we plan annually. We know what roles that we're hiring for, and then our director of talent supports every single hiring manager. Everybody has been trained on how we hire, what we're looking for. We've got frameworks that really push on culture fits, make sure obviously technically people are aligned, and we do it from a centralized standpoint. And it's allowed us to not only get to the place of being ranked as a top organization and the great place to work. We're ranked in Fortune, but our culture has continued to stay consistent with what our CEO's vision was and what it felt like when we were 50 employees. It still feels like that now, and we're 230 employees. That's because the people that we brought into the organizations not only can do the job, but they live the values that we believe in and are here for the right reasons and want to build a career here. And I feel like that also helps us scale faster too, because we've got everybody rowing in the same direction. The mindset is all aligned, the values are aligned, and it really just lends itself to a really healthy environment that people want to be in.
Congratulations to you guys. That is a huge task that you undertook there to grow that much and to keep a good culture. That's amazing. One of the things that I've seen with some of the companies that I've worked with is that when the company starts to grow, there becomes a point where it's like you have to have teams or pods of people that work together mostly, and you end up kind of creating divides just out of pure, we need to have this team working on this separate thing. And so it's task driven, but you can end up having like all these little mini cultures happening. So have you experienced that, or how do you work around that?
Yes, yes. I think every organization, if anyone tells you they've never experienced that, they're lying to you, Sarah. Don't let them do that. Yes, and it still happens today, right? It's very natural. A team takes on the personality of their leader often, right? And so when you talk about like grow cultures, I think about what does that look like? The sales team operating in one way, the operations team operating like a military unit. They're very process oriented. Sales team are like just real scrappy, get things done, push hard. The marketing team being more creative minded. So you have all these different flavors of people on these teams, but what ties them all together is the organizational values, and like what I was describing earlier, being strong culture fits and having the right mindset, being here for the right reasons. And so to answer your question, it ties to operating mechanisms essentially. So what are the structures in which people are getting together? How are we communicating together? How are we meeting together? And making sure that we've got the right handoffs, that we understand what the other team is doing. For sales and marketing in particular, I jumped into marketing back in January of 2025. So I feel like I'm very much still green in the home building marketing space. But very quickly, I have a great relationship with our EVP of sales, Sean Simtani. But it was like, we've got to have these teams working together. The marketing team has got to understand what the sales team's doing so that we can better serve the sales team and vice versa. So it's how are you building those relationships with the people who have shared goals? And at the end of the day, we all have shared goals. So as an organization, we're very goal driven. We have 5 organizational goals that regardless of what role you play in the organization, you're going to get bonused on and rewarded for. So we're all committed to that, but it's making sure that you've got the right conversations happening. And so there's a ton of cross collaborative work that happens inside of our organization. And I'm sure like many organizations, but that has to be that has to be front and center. Those things just can't be left to chance. They've got to be intentional, making sure that the leaders of those teams are getting people together so that they understand the work that's being done and those relationships can be formed and everyone can work towards what it is we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, it's really respect too. But have the knowledge and have the respect for everyone that works around you. And I know I've worked for some not so great managers who they take that away in a sense. Their micromanagement style really makes it so that you don't ever work with anyone else and you don't feel like you can go to your teammates and talk to them. And that's just creating that divide from day one. And it's so unhealthy.
Yes, and that it happens, and it happens. That's been part of our story too. Kind of getting back to silos, and when you're in high growth, everyone being specialized and just focusing on their lane. It wasn't uncommon for any type of issue would run up the chain of command. Most senior person on whatever department would have to be the one resolving the issue that came from the field. And it's, no, that should not be the way things happen. You need to empower the folks underneath you to make the calls and really only escalate whenever absolutely necessary. And so that's been something that we've evolved past, but very natural to the growth phase of an organization. As a leader, especially leaders who are growing from within and just continue to take on more and grow with the growth of the organization, you're used to being the one making the call, people coming to you for the answers. And as you grow, you're not always going to be as close to the information to make the decision. You've got to be able to trust and make sure the people that are below you have what they need to make those calls and just get out of their way. And that's going back to the recruitment piece, a big part of hiring for not only culture, but the right fit so that you can step out of it and let the person. I'm a big proponent of hire people that are smarter than you. That's a no-brainer and just basic in hiring, but it's very normal for that to happen, just given the evolution of how leaders come up an organization.
I have definitely seen that. I've also seen where it only takes that one bad egg, like that one person that is not a good culture fit to bring down not only their team, but everyone around them. And typically, from what I've seen, that's very common if that person in leadership is that one that's not culturally in line. You just end up with this cascading effect of your culture falling apart. And it can happen really quickly. And it's a really scary thing to me.
Yeah, and that's when we get into, okay, now we have to make just really tough decisions, right? People decisions are the hardest decisions to make, but that also happens a ton in growing organizations. You've got the folks that the role fit them when the role was what they were hired for. And then as we've grown and expanded, perhaps the role doesn't fit anymore, or perhaps the culture has shifted as such that person isn't happy here anymore. You can't allow those folks to stay in an organization because they do just poison the well. And those tough calls of this person who's been here for 15 years now isn't really a culture fit. They're resisting the change and not contributing in a healthy way. That's somebody that probably doesn't deserve to be in their seat anymore.
It's really true. And I had Jeremiah Gore was on the podcast a couple episodes back, and he said something where about leadership and people moving up that I thought was really interesting because we're going to take someone that's really good at their job and we're going to give them a different job. And that job is leading people that were doing their original job. And if you don't have training for them and support for them as they do that, sometimes they're not built for a leadership position, and that's okay. And I think in just our world in general, it's like you have to move up in order to be successful. And it's not necessarily always what's going to fulfill you in the long term.
100%. Yeah, we refer to I like to refer to, you've got your rock stars. Those are people who are just solid. They're going to be really good at what they're doing forever. But what they're doing right now is what they're going to be doing. And then you've got your superstars. These are the folks that have a lot of capacity for growth. They're hungry, they're smart, they're driven, and they've got a lot of capacity to take on more. And knowing who those people are. So we do a lot of succession planning in our organization. Every year we do talent reviews just to make sure we know where we're going and do we have the human capital to get us there? And if not, like where are the gaps or how do we develop that? We're super big on promoting from within and developing the skills that people need to be able to take on more and become strong leaders in the organization as we grow. And that takes intentional planning too. You've got to be able to look out long term where we're going and who are those people that are going to be in those seats when we're 5 years down the road.
There's so much planning and thought that goes into that. Now, one of the things too that I've seen with people as they're growing and you're wanting to make sure that your culture is good and things like that, it ends up being, let's just have a meeting about it. And there we end up adding a bunch of meetings. And when we were talking before this episode, we had talked about meetings and meeting structures and how that works. So I'd love it if you could go into your meeting structures. What is that operating rhythm that you feel like keeps people aligned?
Yes. So I fundamentally believe that your calendar is your culture. I think it really represents not only for yourself independently, but as an organization, it really represents what matters and being able to ensure that those forms, that line of communication is open to people to be able to get the information they need to do their jobs. We have a very intentional structure, and it's one of the things we always talk about when we onboard people and we look for when we hire, because we're very structured and regimented in our meeting cadence. And for some folks, that's not a fit. Some people don't like living in a structured environment like that. And I say it not to create this, like, we're not militant or anything, but we just have a routine way in which we operate. And it helps us to get the information flowing through the organization the right way. So we lean really heavily on, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Vern Harnish and Scaling Up. He's got a book called Scaling Up. It's about scaling organizations. We lean really heavily on that framework along with Death by Meeting by Patrick Lencioni. So we basically just have a series of meetings that flow through every level of the organization. So starts with our daily huddles. Every single person has a daily huddle with their team, their first team, the people with their manager. I call it first team. It's like another Patrick Lencioni term. But your immediate team, we have a daily huddle, and it's really just a short alignment point, 10 minutes long, first thing in the morning. What things got accomplished the day before? What are you focused on today? Where are you stuck, if anywhere? How can we help get you unstuck? Or if you need something from somebody in this on this call or somebody in the organization, and then we report out like a key data point, right? So we're keeping track of things that are important to us from the data side. So that's one mechanism. The other is just routine one-on-one meetings. Those are non-negotiables. Every leader in this organization has been trained that way and bought into the importance of every person having that protected time with their leader to just check in on things. And the check-in is really for the person. It's not even for the leader, right? We talk really a lot about the fact that it's not there for you to micromanage or just run through a checklist of everything that's been done, but it's just for them to talk through things that have been, how things are going, where they need support, etc. So one-on-one check-ins on a weekly basis, bi-weekly sometimes, but no shorter period than every other week. Do you have time with your leader to have your one-on-one check-ins? We also do what we refer to as tactical meetings. Sometimes these are cross-functional in nature. We have a sales and marketing tactical meeting where we're getting together, we're talking through data, we're talking through agenda items. Every person just presents agenda item they feel is relevant to the full team to discuss and talk through. And then we have our senior team tactical meeting every Friday. It's just an opportunity for us to get together and make sure that we're all staying on the same page with things that are happening across each of our teams and areas where we're crossing over. And in some of those meetings, there's topics that come up that we're like, you know what, we're not going to solve this issue in 7-minute topic time. So we need to take this offline and have a strategy meeting. So we've got protected time on our calendars every month for strategy meetings where we need to go deeper into topics or issues that need to be solved. And then a big key one for us is our all staff town hall meetings every quarter. We come together, all the organization. Our CEO gets up in the state of the organization address, and then every one of us senior team leaders gets up and does a kind of state of the team for the functional areas that we lead. And then we give awards and just kind of fellowship after that. So those are the core meetings that we live and breathe throughout the year. And they really just support getting things done, keeping people on the same page, and not letting things kind of fester for too long before action can be taken.
One of the things that I've noticed when I go in and work with builders, I'll join their sales meeting or their marketing meetings. And I think that structure is what's missing from so many of them because a lot of it turns into, how are you? What are you working on? All right, cool. What should we do next? And it's like the meeting's so unstructured that you end up having the same meeting 100 different times. Like we just talk about the same things. And it does feel very, okay, this is our agenda and we're going to be very regimented, but I don't know any other way to actually get things done.
No, I know. I'm with you. And I'm like a freak for structure. So for better, for worse, we're going to be structured. So, but it helps and people know what to expect. If you can ask you could say to anybody in this organization, hey, do you have we're going to tactical, and they would know, okay, tactical meetings, this is what we do. We've got a data board. We're going to set the agenda in a round robin fashion. And then we've got next steps. It's very structured, but also just everybody knows what to expect. And that I think helps a lot with accountability too, right? You're not going to show up not having your agenda topics ready for a meeting that you know the structure to. And it just saves a lot of time. And it ends up having something like this in place just also eliminates the need to have like all these little micro meetings, right? Oh, we need to get together because we didn't get this solved. It just helps push all that to the side.
You have quite a few meetings. I would say having a daily huddle that's you're making sure that your team is together every single day at that point. So there shouldn't be a need for a ton more meetings after that, at least for internal work. So yeah, I feel like a lot of companies, they have so many just pointless meetings that then those micro meetings become the ones where you're actually doing stuff. That's actually where you get anything accomplished.
Definitely. And then it saves some of those big strategy meetings they can be a drag. You've got an intense topic. There's lots of next steps coming out of it, but it's also takes a lot of brain power to, hey, we're talking about a topic that has depth to it that we really need to think through. It eliminates those always having to be the case because we're not constantly just in communication with the little things that are happening that could turn into really big things or big problems that have to be solved long term or down the road. So when you say it out loud, it sounds like a lot, but I think it's very effective.
No, I think the knowing what to expect, knowing what's expected of you, it takes that away of just being like, oh my God, there's another meeting. I think it's when people don't have the value built into why we have these meetings, that's where that comes from. So I also say that I'm on board with structure. Now, there's another kind of aspect to running a business that I want to get into before we run out of time. And that is when you have outsourced team members or outsourced services vendors that you're using. And I know that a lot of people, they want to bring everything in-house, but that's not always possible. So what is your philosophy on working with outsourced companies and making sure that's scalable?
Yes. I don't think I really have a philosophy. I just watch for signals that tell me that it makes sense or it's time to bring it in-house. And I think some of those signals are when you're spending more time briefing the partner on the context of your organization, or you're losing a lot of time and reaction to that vendor being able to support you and your needs, right? We've got a struggling community. We need to do something different with ads. Having to wait for a partner to understand what the issue is, and then now help me get something in place to solve this. You just lose a lot of time in that. So it's really just what is the cost benefit of having this work live outside? And then what is our true capacity to be able to take it inside? Talent's a big thing, right? We're in the Rio Grande Valley. We have a lot of talented individuals, but we're not in Austin, Texas, where talent, you can find anybody anywhere. So I think you got to be realistic about who you have down, what does your talent pool look like to be able to serve you internally? And then the cost benefit of, is this really helping or hurting you by having it outsourced? And I do think that scale plays a role in that. As you get bigger and the volume of what you're managing becomes more complex, having that control internally just makes a ton more sense, oftentimes more than not, to have it in-house. But then marketing is not just a generalist discipline, right? There's so many different functions of marketing that there are some things that are highly specialized that keeping outsourced makes sense until it doesn't. But that's how I think about that.
I agree. I think outsourcing things allows builders to scale to a certain point, and then it does make sense to bring them in-house. I think a lot of vendors hate that I say that, but it's true. And there's a lot of builders out there. So when one outgrows you, there's plenty more.
And I
But
think,
go
oh, go
ahead.
ahead. I was just going to say, I think what's important too for me is that it's an evolution of how that partner relationship looks, right? At one point, that person might have been running your ads. Now they're just a mentor and an advisor. So I think you have to stay connected to the outside always. Just how that looks is different based on where you're at and what your needs are. So it's not, I don't think it's, my focus has never been to bring things inside just to close the wall or close the door, but to let's bring it inside and get the help to help train and teach the people inside that are doing the work so that we can be more nimble, move more quickly, and get the results faster by building that knowledge and having that institutional knowledge that we need to get things done.
Yes, especially in marketing. And I love what you said about one marketer is not going to be able to do every discipline in marketing. And I think that's a really good way to fill those gaps, bring in a vendor. And I see so many builders not doing that, especially in marketing. And they hire one person and then can't understand why you can't be a designer and a photographer and run your ads and do email marketing and also be the OSC on the side. That's a ton of things. That's not one person's job. So I do think there's definitely a place for vendors in there. And I love that when vendors can build you better from the inside out.
Yeah. And what you're describing also, Sarah, is a very common growth issue too, right? The person, like we talked about earlier, the person that was hired to do the job 4 years ago that in an organization that looked like this, and the job looked like this, was designed to be a certain role, that has now evolved, right? So I think that's just that those types of things, not only are you looking at the external people and does this make sense for or who the partner is, or should we even have an outside party doing this versus in-house, you're constantly having to look at your internal team too and making sure that people are in the right seats and being able to do what it is they've been called to do for the roles that they're in.
I see it all the time when we come in and there's a marketing manager that's when I first started, I had a 5-person team and now it's just me. And then the business did not really adapt to either people leaving or whatever had happened. And you really have to stay on top of that, especially as you're wanting to grow. You have to understand your team's capacity.
Yep.
So I have a few last questions for you. This is our kind of rapid fire section at the end of our episode. So I'd love to give you these questions, short answers, really tactical things that builders can take away.
Okay.
So the first one is, what is one operational habit that more builders need?
I would say consistent operating mechanisms.
Are you talking like standard operating procedures or like
No, operating mechanisms in terms of meeting structures, like a
meeting
standard,
structures? Yes.
and even more, I'll clarify, consistent leadership operating mechanism, like where the senior leaders of the organizations is getting together on a routine weekly, monthly, quarterly basis to not just check in with each other, but to actually have conversations, make decisions together, solve problems, and look ahead, step out of their functional areas and look at the organizational pipeline in the same way that they're approaching their own individual work.
100%. Okay, next one. What's one thing leadership teams often overlook?
This one's easy. I think it's the cost of unresolved conflict. And naturally, people don't like hard conversations because they're uncomfortable. But I think that whenever things go unresolved, things fester and it becomes way more expensive and a lot more negativity can come from that. And so I think healthy teams are really important. And if you leave conflict unresolved, you're never going to be in a place to have healthy, high trust, high performing teams.
Oh, I love that. That's so good. Okay, last one. What's one thing builders should stop overcomplicating?
We'll circle back to the very beginning. Communication. I think there's so much that rides on communication. Trust is built through communication. Relationship is built through communication. Belonging is built on communication. Understanding, connection, all those things. And so don't overcomplicate it. I think just find a methodology that works for you and stick to it.
Full circle moment. I love it. All right. Thank you so much, Misty, for sharing all of this with me today. I really do think that this is going to be so helpful for businesses. I know it was helpful for me. So if there is anyone out there who would like to reach out to you, how would they do that?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn. So you can find me, Misty D. Martin, I believe is my name on LinkedIn. And then my email. Folks can feel free to reach out to me via email. My email is mmartin@rhodes.com, RHODES. And I'll be happy to engage and
Awesome. All right. Please go do that, everyone. Also, we will be in the comment section below as well. We love to answer questions and have discussion there in the comments. So please take advantage of that. And while you are there, just hit that little like button as well. That makes me feel good and helps get this podcast out to more people. I appreciate you all being here. I appreciate you being here as well, Misty. And I just can't wait to hear how this episode impacts our listeners.
awesome. Thank you for the opportunity, Sarah.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. We will see you in our next episode. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.